Yeah. And maybe the president will make me Secretary of Pussy. Welcome to HUGtober's podcast. I'm Liam. You're Liam. I'm Rob.
Yeah, that's right.
Welcome to our third in the HUGtober season, and this week we watched The People Under the Stairs. Now, if you haven't seen The People Under the Stairs, think Home Alone meets The Hills Have Eyes, where a young boy named Fool has to battle an evil mother and father, or brother and sister, played by the husband and wife from Twin Peaks, in a house of horrors to find a hidden treasure. Where can the treasure be? Is there any treasure, or will it just turn out to be fool's gold? See what I did there? Or fool's gold? Yeah.
Yeah, we saw.
Yeah. Now, I've watched this film multiple times as a kid, and to be fair, I really enjoyed it. Liam's never seen it, but you did raise a good point last week, Liam. Like, is this a horror, or is it a kid's horror in the vein of Monster Squad? Now, I was thinking about that because we class that as a kid's horror, but even Monster Squad was still a 15 rating in the UK, an R rating in America. So that's still quite like a horror film. So, what are your thoughts now you've watched it? Is this a kid's horror?
No, I'm not at all. It's weird because I can't believe this movie exists. Let me just make this clear, because this film, above all else, and I did like this film, just to be clear, it's weird as fuck, and it would never get made today, because the big question is, who is this for? I mean, my obvious answer is it's for kids, and a lot of people, well, a lot of my friends growing up watched this as kids, and as I said, I never watched it for some reason. If fell under my radar. But I had it in my head, and when we did like the trailer review earlier in the week, I was like, I still don't know if this is a kid's film or if this is a horror film or a horror comedy or whatever. And it is a bit of all those things, but it goes so hard on the horror when it does that you could never argue that this could be a kid's film. Like, Poltergeist kind of pushes the boundaries, and as you said, I'm actually a little bit surprised that Monster Squad is a 15 and certainly an R-rated movie in America. When I checked and saw that this film was an 18, I'm like, oh yeah, of course it is. But it doesn't feel like a movie made for adults. It feels like a movie made for kids in that kind of the same vein as those Amblin films.
Yeah.
But when the violence comes in, the way Leroy dies, which is a crime in itself, because Leroy should have been in more of this film. But you look at some of the themes, I was like, when I asked the question to myself, is this an 18 film? Is this a kid's film? And I started listing the things that pop up in this film: domestic violence, drugs, race politics, was it monsters, cannibalism, mutilation, child abuse, potential incest. I was like, no, this is not a fucking kid's film. And yet structurally, it feels like a kid's film, especially in terms of our relationship with Fool.
As I said, it kind of feels like Home Alone. It's like a reverse. It's like a reverse Home Alone.
Well, it's like Home Alone for black people. I know that sounds, especially coming from a white person, but nobody robs your house if you're that poor, and that's because the white criminals have already robbed you and all of your friends. So you have to go to their house only to get stuck. You call the police, but they don't arrest the white people. So it's that kind of weird inverted black version of Home Alone kind of thing. And I mean, I'm sure we'll get to it. But the other thing that really surprised me was the social commentary, which runs all the way through this film and is in no way subtle. But, another reason it's not a kid's film.
I wanted to mention, right, because I said this before, I watched this film multiple times. I can't tell you how many times, but it's multiple. And for some reason, I've never linked the cannibalism thing. Now, I understand that the people under the stairs were actually cannibals, and we'll get to the question, or we'll get to the point where they actually let the cannibals out on the street at the end of the film.
But, you mean the batshit final scene of this film, which is, let's be clear, again, from a completely different fucking movie. But yes, we'll get there.
But the opening scene, or the opening introduction of the brother, sister, mother, father, husband, wife people. I'm just going to call them mummy and daddy from now on.
Well, they're listed in the credits as man and woman, but they're referred to as mummy and daddy. And we've talked about, we briefly alluded to the social commentary in this film. It's a very unsubtle nod to Nancy and Ronald Reagan, who actually, their pet names for each other were mummy and daddy, which might be actually the grossest thing about this film. So,
I never linked that he was eating a rib cage, or at least a human rib cage at the beginning.
No, I totally get that.
Yeah. But when he's feeding them, I don't know if it was Leroy or the other guy, Lewis was his name, the gas.
The gas guy. The guy who's going to be the gas. Spencer. Yeah, thank you.
I don't know whether he was
He looked like
cutting
Lewis.
Spencer or Leroy at that point. But I never, again, I don't know why, but I never linked to the fact that he's eating part of that person as he's the people under the stairs. He's got blood all over his mouth. He's having a nice chomp. It's like, Jesus Christ, he is actually a cannibal.
Well, there's loads of things in this movie where I can totally see how you might miss it first time around, and maybe I'd kind of be more aware of it because I'm watching it for a podcast, so I'm making notes and I'm paying attention to what I would if I was watching it casually. But there are so many. There's so much movie in People Under the Stairs that so much of it actually gets sidelined. Like there's a bit of a dogtooth situation hinted at with Alice, where she doesn't understand how the outside world works. Like they literally do make it clear at one point. It's like, oh, she literally has never been outside. So for a second, it almost feels like it's going to go, Yorgos Lanthimos, Dogtooth style. Like, oh, this is going to be dark and interesting and twisted. And then they just kind of leave it there because there's just not enough time for it. Yeah. And you get that. And the same thing with the cannibalism. It's almost like a blink and you miss it, hint of cannibalism. Yeah. But as I was listing the things that happen in this film, there's so much. Even the social commentary is like bookended in this film. Like they go really heavy at the start with when they establish Leroy's relationship with his sister and his mother being ill. Yeah. Then at the end, it all comes in really heavily at the end when the community show up at the door. But then even that is kind of abandoned for like a good hour and 15, 20 minutes because they've got so much plot and so much character to deal with. Like, I don't want to be overly critical because I borderline love this film, but there's just so much going on. There's two movies worth of stuff in this film.
Because you said that there's a slight hint to the cannibalism. There's the slightest hint of the child abuse, sexual abuse. Like when
that bit's dark as fuck. And
when he's in the attic.
Again, every time you have that little moment when you're like, oh, is this a kid's film? And then Daddy, dressed as a gimp, grabs his crotch. And I've never been so relieved to find out that they were just child snatchers.
Yes.
I was like, oh, thank God it's not their actual daughter. They just snatched her as a child, which is dark enough anyway. But I was genuinely fucking relieved.
But like he's there just tugging on his crotch. And it's just, it's so good.
But that'll come like 2 minutes after Fool will have like a really quippy moment. And that is in the midst of like the final act of this film, when it does, as you already mentioned, go full Home Alone. Proper Home Alone. Short of, I'm sure it's one of those, like if you added the Home Alone music over the top, it would just totally work. But then all of a sudden, every time you think, oh, this is kind of getting fun. Like, oh, no, there is cannibalism and incest. And even the people under the stage, like the concept is really dark and disturbing, but they also look like zombie versions of Wayne's World. So it kind of takes the edge off again.
Why was that guy with the mask as well? There was the one kid who looked like he skinned a football and made a mask out of it.
It was like the rest of them were all Wayne's World fans, and then just one Slipknot kid just kind of snuck his way into the gang. It's like, well, he's into Slipknot, but we let him hang around with us. What the fuck can you do,
Do you know before they go to the house, Fool comes back after he's found out that they're about to be evicted. It cuts to the daytime, and Fool's running across the street holding medicine in a brown paper bag. And he runs up this. I've never noticed this before. It was so funny. And it's not him, but it sounds like somebody says, "Hey, Fool, I hear you're getting evicted. Do you maybe that just bypassed you, I'm guessing." Or I want you to go back and watch that at some point, because that sounds like Cheech from Cheech and Chong, or from Pussy Guy. It just completely sounds like just
randomly together. But that's the thing. Even like taking notes to this film, I found it hard to kind of keep up with everything that happened. I mean, even beyond the plot points, in terms of just listing everything that actually happens in this film. Again, I know I keep coming back to the whole social commentary side, but this isn't some like subtle, oh, this is just about kind of what it was like to be black in America in the early 90s, something which actually feels very prescient now because the issues are still there. But when you look back at this film, it covers greed, race, feminism, and classism, but all without ever feeling heavy-handed, or more importantly, none of these issues it actually tackles ever come at the cost of this movie's sense of enjoyment. Like one of the reasons this movie works so well, I think, is that it's never po-faced. Because a lot of like modern films which try and tackle these things, it always feels a bit more forced. So don't get me wrong, Get Out was a perfect example that it can be achieved in modern films. But when I think of something like what was it called? Candyman remake. That had like all the subtlety and nuance of a sledgehammer. And I think a lot of these films, they're made with like a fear of that modern online backlash, whereas this film was made years before that. So I think it pleasingly just doesn't give a fuck. I don't think there's any cynicism to anything. So I just think this is how Wes Craven sees the world and sees some of the issues. And he was making like black horror 20, 30 years before black horror really became a thing, certainly in the mainstream, in the same way that I don't think like Quentin Tarantino was given enough credit for making feminist mainstream movies 20 years before the Me Too movement. I remember like some asshole journalist had the fucking audacity to complain to him about the fact that, what's her name, Margot Robbie didn't have enough lines in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I was like, dude, he was making mainstream movies with middle-aged black women in like 1996. Go fuck yourself. And I just think it's one of these things. Wes Craven, I don't think he gets enough, and I was blissfully unaware of it, but I don't think he gets enough credit for this film because this film is so far ahead of its time.
This film is great, right? Mm-hmm. This is why I love this podcast, and this is why I think me and you work so well together. Because you just spent about 5 minutes then, rightfully so, talking about the socialism, talking about all the
not socialism. That's a very different thing.
Social commentary. You've linked onto that part, and that's fantastic. My biggest note: I love that Daddy's hobby is to dress up as a gimp and hunt the boy in the walls. Like literally, we've looked at this two different angles.
I know, and both of them are completely apt. And they both make it all the more amazing that nobody talks about this film. Like this film isn't on TV; it's never brought up. No. And like I said, going back and rewatching it now, I'm just like, why doesn't everyone talk about this film? Why isn't there like a constant push? And I know there has been some talk of like a remake or a reboot or whatever.
Yeah, well, Wes Craven was going to do one right up until he passed away. It was a TV show for sci-fi. I just want, in regards to the gimp suit, I feel for the costume designer, right? Because like what's his name? Everett McGill, I think his name is. Yeah, I still think of him as Big Ed Hurley and Nadine from Twin Peaks. I just can't help it. I see them. As soon as it came on, I was like, that's Big Ed Hurley and Nadine, and they're playing Mummy and Daddy. That's fucking amazing. That was in my intro. Yeah, Mummy, Daddy, wife, husband. But I just feel for the costume designer because he's a big dude. You had to get a lot of leather to fit that guy. Well, the thing is as well, and again, you got to remember, like, this is the first time I've watched this film, and it's already weird. But then, for no apparent reason, he just shows up in a gimp suit. There's no warning. There's no context. It's just all of a sudden he's got a shotgun and a gimp suit, and I was like, "What the fuck?" And I was watching it with my wife, and she feels very much. She probably didn't like the movie quite as much as me, but she said she was glad she watched it because she thinks it might be one of the most insane mainstream movies she's ever seen. And that's just one example of 100 in this film, where you're sitting there and watching it, and you go, "Wait, why is he in a gimp suit?" Oh, he just is. Don't worry about it. Like, that is literally the answer to that question. They're fucked up, so we'll just push it as far as we can. And of course, the other thing I'm thinking is he's shooting all these holes in his house with a shotgun. I'm just like, that's a lot of structural damage, you know? And I don't know how they get away with it personally. In regards to just move on from the gimp suit kind of thing, they do that with the rules of the house as well. Whereas he can't get inside the walls. But somebody has done some design work in these walls because they made a slide for a dog. Right. Nearly everybody in this film is brilliant. I mean, I would argue that Leroy steals the show. Ving Rhames as Leroy steals the show. But if anyone comes close, it's Prince the dog. Some absolutely top-tier dog acting. And if nothing else, it really... This film forces you to question your relationship with movie dogs because he's great at acting. I was going to ask how you felt because you've always said if you kill the dog, you've ruined the movie. And I was going to ask. Well, it's usually that's the deal. I've mentioned before, like, in all these films where you get thousands, like Independence Day is a famous one. Thousands of people are dying in the tunnel, but you cheer because the dog survives. As long as the dog survives, everything's fine. In this, the dog's an asshole, but he has just enough in the way of comedic moments where you're like, do I like this dog or do I hate this dog? And then they flat out kill the dog, which is a bold move. You do not get that in many films. And I wasn't sure how I felt about it. Not just the killing of the dog, But before he found out it was the dog, I absolutely loved his dance. Oh, I got him, I got him, I got him. I got him, I got him, I got him. As he's running
again, a big performance. Big old performance.
When she says, show me, and then he breaks into the wall, a big enough hole that he can get in mine. So I don't understand why, because he says he's afraid of the things in the wall, but the only thing in the wall is the thing he's trying to hunt, which is Roach. And I'm pretty sure we'll mention that in a minute. But I do love, not so much the dog falling out, but when Prince falls out with his neck and stuff, and you see Daddy go, oh shit! Like,
well, that again, like he plays some of those moments for broadly comedic purposes.
Yeah,
like really goes for it. But again, that sits alongside him, kind of dressed as a gimp trying to kill a small black child. It's really strange, and even
oh my God.
I mentioned the fact that I love.
I just want to make a T-shirt. I want to make a T-shirt or a soundbite of you just saying a man dressed as a gimp trying to kill a small black child.
Yeah, that could be the quote from the
if that
episode,
becomes the tagline of this film, then that's insane. When you narrow it
the
down
thing is,
to
this
that,
film could totally pull that off. That's how insane this film is. And I mean, you talk about like different, like Ving Rhames himself. He's not in it for nearly long enough, as I already mentioned, but he feels like he's from a completely different movie. Like he's borderline playing Marcellus Wallace, like Marcellus Wallace at 30, basically. You already gave one of his best quotes about maybe the president's going to make me secretary of pussy, but he had like the 13th birthday as unlucky anyway, too old to get tit, too young to get ass. Fucked either way. So I love the quote, the bizarrely low-key one, just because a man is laying on the floor don't mean he's dead. Just like, okay, fair enough. He's like one step away from I'm gonna call a couple of hard pipe hitting who go to work on homes here with a pair of pliers and a blowtorch. You hear me talking, hillbilly boy? It's like literally a stone's throw away from him delivering that kind of line. It does feel like Marcellus Wallace before he hit it big, but
I love the conversation.
Feels like a completely different movie from the one that includes Prince and Daddy doing his little dance.
I love the conversation he has with Fool as well about, do you find Spencer? Yeah. Do you find anything? No, he dead. You sure he's dead? You thought that guy was white before? You should see that sucker now.
I don't know. It is really hard to kind of critically place this film. And it is utterly unique in that regard. And I mentioned earlier the fact that this film would never get made in 2023. And I'm not saying it couldn't get remade, but it wouldn't be like this.
No, there's just no way in hell it would be like this. No. I mean, the whole kidnapping thing is insane. Like, they're kidnapping kids to make. So that's the question that they ask, because from what randomly just Bill Cobb shows up, just becomes the granddad as well.
Yeah, he doesn't get nearly a big enough role in this film.
No, but he shows up.
He's the guy from Demolition Man, yeah?
Yeah.
Zach,
whatever his name was.
Zach Lamb, I think.
Zach Lamb, Zachary Lamb. Yeah. Shit, you were a damn good pilot. But he shows up and he says, oh, no, they're brother and sister. Mm-hmm. But my question is, are they the product of that generation's kidnapped kids? Because what she said was, well, he said before, they've been going on for generations, his family. And they're kidnapping kids. They're trying to find the perfect boy, but all the boys are unruly. That's why they're keeping them under the stairs.
Yeah.
So a mummy and daddy, the product of the previous generation's kidnapped kids.
Oh, I see what you mean. No, I got the impression that they're just out of their fucking minds and that they're like basically kidnapping. So I don't think they're the product of kidnapped. I don't think they were kidnapped kids themselves. I think they're just lunatics.
I didn't know whether they were hinting at that, like that side of it.
No, because again, if we kind of lean into the whole social commentary side of it, I think the idea is that they're kind of this long line of like rich white folk, and now they're
social
just kind
commentary, not socialism, yeah.
Not socialism, that's for sure. So yeah, I think they're just rich people who come from a rich family who have just gone out of their fucking mind, basically. And they really have gone quite out of their minds. And it is strange that the film isn't maybe called Mummy and Daddy, which is a terrible title, of course. But the fact that this film is called The People Under the Stairs, but the people under the stairs play such a surprisingly small role in the movie itself. And also,
are they under the stairs?
Well, some of them are, but I don't know. Like roaches,
they're in the basement.
Yeah, they are in the basement, aren't they? I guess the basement could be under the stairs. I'll give them. And there is the whole bit where there are the stairs,
and they come out of the stairs. Yeah,
you could call it the kids in the basement, but the people on the stairs does sound pretty cool. But you've got them, and then Roach seems to be his own unique thing. And personally, going into this film, because obviously I've seen clips of it and I've seen posters and stuff, in my head, as soon as he showed up, I was like, oh, well, Roach is going to play a massive part of this film. He's killed almost immediately.
And I completely forgot how quick he gets killed. Like, you hear him more than you see him. You can hear him orgasming through the walls, because it basically just sounds like he's wanking over everything. And then you finally see him. He rescues Four. They go to Alice's room. Again, from where the living room is, or sorry, they were out the back, wasn't they, where the van was. So from the back garden to Alice's room, where they found out there was a bear trooper. That's a long old way, isn't it? Because
yes, fair bet, I suppose.
It must be, because they had enough time to have a conversation about cutting kids' tongues off. And
well, that's one of the things with this film is that, and I am stepping on the video game section here, the house towards the end goes full Resident Evil. Like, make no
I knew
mistakes.
you were going to do Resident Evil anyway.
Yeah, well, of course I'm going to do Resident Evil, but it doesn't. I don't think the house actually makes all that much sense.
Of course it doesn't. Those fucking in between the walls, the space in between the walls, which would have been a decent title as well.
Yeah,
the space in between the walls is absolutely massive. Yeah, because they don't have to walk sideways to get through it. They can run. I know they're kids, but still, they can run straight.
Oh yeah. It's all like ridiculous. It's a movie house, and what it is really is a haunted house without the ghosts.
Yeah,
that's the way it's built. It was built by a fucking lunatic. It was built by set designers. It has no relation to the real world whatsoever. Like, even down to the fact, I know they've got kind of soundproof windows, but I mean, do they live within like earshot of anybody? Because he runs around the house shooting you know how loud fucking shotguns are? It's ridiculous. And then the police, like the whole police force apparently show up when they call them. They give them all biscuits. It's like, you can do as much tidying as you want. You've shot holes in the fucking wall. No police officer's going to go upstairs and go, wait a minute, there's like 72 shotgun fucking holes.
And you're telling me none of them checked the attic?
I mean, they've walked through the door, they've gone, oh, cookies. And like 12 of them have just walked the fuck back out. Of course it's ludicrous.
How he comes out wearing that, like, all the coppers are hanging around there, and he's come out of the room and he's carrying a chain in his hand, and he picks up handcuffs off a bureau or a side table. And then he opens his magic door, chucks him in with the guns and all that. But
it's pretty cool, yeah.
Nobody has actually walked past there before. Because as soon as he does that, a copper turns around the corner. So nobody's seen these handcuffs or these chains.
Well, there's like 72 clear signs that the police should have picked up on. But like, the level of incompetence is just completely beyond.
Yeah. What about his weird, I was going to say murder room, his wall of pride, which again, I've never noticed because it's so quick. He goes into that. That's the room where he kills Prince. But he's got pictures on the wall of all the kids. I'm guessing he's kidnapped all the missing.
Yeah, tons. He's got. There's another room, like a money room.
Yeah,
like a fucking
money room.
Scrooge McDuck money room.
Yeah, that's the money vault. But why? Again, he's scared of the people under the stairs. But he keeps his vault in their den, in their lair.
It's ridiculous. I get it. Like, they're trying to use it as like a visual analogy for like white people stealing money from black communities, or like, even if you like, they use black communities in this, but I think it's more kind of like, poorer communities,
richer and poorer,
rich and poor. Like, but obviously it has more of an impact when it's white and black. So I get from a visual perspective why they want to do that, but why they would just have the money all over the floor, and as you say, right next to the people under the stairs. It makes no sense. But this film almost hasn't got enough time to make sense. It comes back to what I said earlier. There's so much story, there's so much plot, so many characters. They're just like, we haven't got time to explain this. They put imagery and fun ahead of like anything making sense, basically. And I got to be honest, even though I was aware of it because I'm watching it in that critical way, I was more than happy to ignore it all because the film is fun, and it is
very fun,
absolutely batshit. And I don't think my friends made it clear, because as I said, growing up, my friends Puddin and Curly, they were the ones who watched this, and they were the ones who always swore by it, and they have this relationship with this film. I don't think for a second they ever made it clear to me just how fucking insane this film is. And like I said, I was still on the fence as to whether, I gotta be honest, I was expecting, you mentioned it earlier, Monster Squad.
Yeah.
I was expecting that level of violence and that level of scares. Like, it's Wes Craven, so they'll hint at the scares and it might get a bit weird. but they'll kind of, they won't go over the line.
Yeah.
This film immediately strolls past the line. It goes so far past the line that the line is a dot to them. I was not expecting it in any way. And I think the film is all the better and all the more memorable for it. But it does always bring me back to this idea, like, who is this for? And I think that's the reason, above all else, why this is a cult film and not a beloved film.
Oh, yeah.
Because this was basically for a small group of kids in the early 90s who were basically allowed to watch an 18-rated film. That's who it was made for. Because, we've mentioned, like, with Poltergeist, with Gremlins, all these films in the 80s, and they don't exist anymore. What kids used to love and what we used to love about those films when we were younger is that they did kind of scare the shit out of you. And films for kids back then weren't afraid to push the boundaries. And of course, there was the whole there wasn't a 15 for the longest time. So they really pushed the boundaries of what was possible in a quote-unquote PG film. I don't know why quote-unquote, it is just a PG film. But this film isn't that. It's just a fucking 18 film where they're like, well, maybe some kids will go and see it, but strange, to say the least.
One of the, when we first started doing this podcast, I said to you, we're going to cover at some point People Under the Stairs. And I can't believe it's taken us nearly 3 years to do it.
We got to wait for the Halloween special. That makes sense.
But we were always going to cover it because, as you said, I've been trying to tell you, I don't think, I've sold it like Puddin' and Curly did, but it is a batshit film. It's absolutely insane. And
just to be clear, for people who are listening to, like, they don't know my friends, Puddin' and Curly are real people. I don't live with fucking cartoons. This isn't The Sandlot. I'm bringing up The Sandlot because obviously the star was also in The Sandlot.
Yeah,
unbelievable. He wasn't actually in that many movies. Fool. But he just happened to be in maybe the two most beloved kids' sports movies of all time. Yeah. Like, you can make an argument for I know you don't feel as strongly about Sandlot Kids, but make no mistake, outside, like, regardless of what you feel about it, it is totally beloved, that film. In the same way that Mighty Ducks are. I think they might be the two most beloved sports films, kids' sports films of all time. And he's in the fucking both of them. And he's also in this. Bonkers.
When I was thinking of kids films, right? And you said, like, and if I think of a kids horror film, have you ever seen a film called Little Monsters?
Yes,
with Fred Savage.
Yeah. That's what you think. Yeah. Like, pushing the boundaries. I always think, like, when I was thinking of, like, horror for kids, and it's more of a family film, but I always thought, like, Poltergeist really took it to the edge in terms of, like,
I don't think that was a horror for kids, mate.
Well, it was a family horror, though, wasn't it? It wasn't like an 18, though. I think it was a PG. That was the whole point of it. And it did, but that's the point. It was like, I remember kids were allowed to watch it because it was a PG, and you would go and see it and be like, wow, this is like bored. This feels like, and to bring it back to my initial point, that whole idea that in the 80s you could watch a film and it felt like you were watching a film for grown-ups.
Yeah.
It went right up to the line, but didn't go over, so you could get away with watching it.
There's no way Poltergeist was a PG.
I'm sure it was a PG because it came in before the rate. I think they brought in the ratings afterwards, but I think Poltergeist, when it originally came out, was a PG. I think we mentioned it on the podcast, but in fact,
we must have. I mean, we did that last
2.5 years ago.
So,
but yeah. I got a funny feeling when it came out, it was a PG. But like I said, whether it was a PG or 15, like, this is so far beyond that. Like, when you see Leroy's body, it's absolutely demolished, and the themes alone are just far too dark for it to be.
Well, I mean, they've got that weird cellar where the basement under the basement where they chuck all the bodies in. Yeah,
it's gross.
Yeah, full of, I don't know, some sort of melting liquid that just seems to take all the skin away. And I love it.
Imagine if you're a kid and you're watching it with your parents, like, Dad, is that man going to fuck his daughter? He might. It's just, it's one of those horrible things.
Only if his sister wife lets him.
Yeah, exactly. It's so fucking, this film's so messed up. But all the time, I'm just like, every time this happens, like you said, it's playing out. Everything else is playing out like fucking Home Alone.
Yeah.
And it's just got all these super dark, twisted themes kind of tacked on top of this oddly fun movie, because at its core, despite everything we've just said, this film is fun because it does feel like a ghost house. It does feel like Home Alone. It just happens to have, incest and all this other unpleasantness. It's, yeah.
Did you,
how many times can we say this film's weird? But it is.
Did you see Alice break character towards the end of the film as well?
No.
It must have been the best take. She's she's looking down the basement with Fool's sister Ruby. and then the door shuts. So they shut the cellar door or the basement door, and then Ruby turns around and goes, "Now where'd that crazy heifer go?" And as she says "crazy heifer," you see Alice in the back just piss herself laughing. Looks at the floor and pisses herself laughing. I thought that was
probably
quite good.
get away with it because Alice is very good in this film, but she goes a little bit kind of John Rambo at the end of this film. But, and again, I said we're going to get to, we might as well. As much as I love this film, the ending feels messy as fuck. They're trying to force in the whole, as I said, this film is, bookended by social commentary. They're trying to force that in while all this wacky Wayne's World stuff is going on. And just as you think it can't get any stranger, the ending, the final shot in particular, feels like the ending to a Ghostbusters movie. But it's just far too fucked up for that. You mentioned earlier the fact that these people under the stairs who are cannibals are just let loose, and they almost do like a little wave to each other, like, "Oh, good luck out there." Like the film at that point is suggesting everything's going to be fine. No, those kids are going to be shot on the streets of LA. They're fucking cannibals. What the hell's going on with this film? I'd love it if it's like just this film was 10 minutes longer and the police just roll up and shoot everyone. It's the ending,
you needed to see,
and then it even has like the early 90s white friendly rap song in the credits.
Yeah, the song that was actually written for the film Do the Right Thing.
Fantastic.
But then they didn't use it, so they decided to use it on this anyway. When I heard that song, I instantly thought of Body Count. Like a random song that doesn't belong for the film. But all I could picture, if this film was 10 minutes long, all I could picture was all those cannibals sat with all the druggies in Fool's apartment complex. Just, you've got, because you saw one woman just shooting up. So the next thing you do, you just see one of those cannibals just eating a leg. Just waving, eating a leg.
If there's one thing this film does lack, it is a bit of subtlety. And when Fool is going to the flat to deliver the drugs or whatever it is, it's the most ludicrous building of all time. Like outside, you almost think it's like, oh, well, it's slightly more multicultural. There's kids playing around. And despite the fact that it's in the middle of the day, as soon as he goes in, it is the most depressing drug-fueled hell I've ever seen in my life. I'm like, come on, man, that's a little bit on the nose.
Because they did say as well that they're the only family living there. So all those people are just hanging out in the stairwell.
Yeah, just doing drugs. Like, how fucking poor are you? They're just like the poorest people of all time. But it is, as I say, this film, it doesn't all work. No. It's far from perfect.
Like the one thing I thought that didn't work was Brandon Adams' Fool. He all of a sudden became a master electrician. Like right at the end, you had the cannibal point to the safe and go, and he went, "Oh, it's got an alarm, is it? No worries, I learned from the best." Mate, you met the best 2.5 hours ago. He didn't do anything except hit things with a fucking crowbar. And now you can rewire circuitry and then set up and elaborate another Home Alone trap with the coins and the candles, which candles don't burn that quick. I'm sorry.
No, they definitely don't. That was ill-conceived. Visually, it works, but it just doesn't make sense.
And then the fucking dynamite thing, which didn't take anyone out except for Daddy. The man survived.
A lot, like we mentioned it a few times, a lot of the stuff in this film doesn't make sense. And this film takes a lot of very big swings. And it's got too many ideas for one movie, and not all of it works. But I mean, I've got to appreciate the fact that it even happened. We mentioned previously that this film would never get made in 2023, and there's so many reasons for that. But one is simply they're like, this film's too insane. Like, no one's going to fund it. But fair play to Wes Craven, who wrote and directed this film. I mean, he's nothing if not hit and miss as a director. This is the guy who kind of rewrote the rules of the slasher genre with Nightmare on Elm Street. It went under the radar, but New Nightmare was the other one he directed in the series, because he didn't direct the other films in the series, but he came back for New Nightmare, which was years ahead of Scream and was super meta. And I think it's kind of been reappraised. But I remember watching this kid, I was just like, why isn't everyone losing their mind about this film? It was the premise is genius. He did the first 4 Scream films, and as we mentioned on the Scream podcast, it's one of the most consistent horror franchises of all time. You can argue about the relative quality, but I don't think he ever had a miss. Like, the second one's not amazing, but they're all at least decent. But this is the guy who also did Vampire in Brooklyn, which I've got a bit of a soft spot for, but it's not brilliant. He did Shocker. My Soul to Take was one of his last films. That was an absolute stinker. So he's one of these directors who is hit and miss, but He was always trying to push the genre forward. And this, like I said, People Under the Stairs, for all of its faults, is years ahead of the game. And it just didn't get the credit it deserved because it was just too fucking weird. If this film had just if he had just a hint of thinking, okay, I've got to make this a touch more mainstream, maybe something would have been lost if he tried to pare it back a bit. But I think that's the only reason people don't talk about this film over 30 years later is because it was so strange that it just never caught on in the mainstream.
But I would argue the reason why it stuck with me for so long
is for those reasons.
Is the fact that it's not mainstream. I
exactly,
mean,
yeah.
I'm starting to become known for not liking the actual mainstream things, for liking the weird and the kooky and the offbeat ones. And this is absolutely up there. Like, it's everything about this film works. Mm-hmm. Well, no, most of the things about this film works, but they shouldn't. And as you've already said, it's got so much within it. You've got the robbers, the thieves, you've got cannibals, you've got the poor family, you've got a gimp, you've got sexual assault, you've got there's so much going on.
There's a bit too much. And as I mentioned, it's one of those weird ones because it works because it's insane, but it also probably didn't garner the mainstream attention it could have because it's so insane. So it's kind of a bit of a catch-22. Is that what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, is it catch-42? No, it's catch-22. So it is like you said, that people who've seen it love it, and that's why it's maybe the ultimate cult movie in many regards, because the people who did watch it fell in love with it because of the insanity, but that insanity meant that it was never ever going to make the box office required for it to become like a mainstream hit. It's just never on the cards at all.
I was just looking at the credits, right? Aside from like some of the Kids Under the Stairs being like, I'm guessing called for where they came from. You had Stairmaster, Stairperson 1 and Stairperson 2.
Mm-hmm.
I said previously on this episode, like, how do they not check the attic? But there's an actor here, George R. Baker, who is just credited as attic cop. So I'm guessing he went to the attic and just is blind? Didn't see the girl chained up?
I don't know. I mean, the competence of the cops knows no bounds. Apparently, it just, like I said, that sequence doesn't. It just, I would have like written that out. I was like, dude, you cannot have the cops get into the house. As soon as the cops get into the house, the game is fucking over. The jig is up. The place is a fucking minefield of evidence everywhere. They just can't miss it. But they're like, oh no, we want the cops in the house for dramatic purposes or whatever, and we're just going to have to just paper over the fact that they're idiots. That's the only explanation.
What did Fool tell them on the phone as well? Because the entire fucking precinct showed up.
Yeah, because I thought they were going to do, the whole thing, like, because he was a black kid, they weren't really going to take him seriously. They were going to show up at the house, see, the whites, like they did earlier in the film, and be like, oh, okay, don't worry, we won't come in, blah, blah, blah. And that's how they were going to explain it away. Kind of like, with Die Hard, when they show up at the building, but they're like, oh, this guy's out of his fucking mind, we're not going in. I was convinced they were going to do that. When they, showed up, and like you said, they took half the precinct with them, I was like, how can they not see what's going on in this house? Maybe they could have got away with it if one cop had gone and they'd made a scene of like kept pushing him into the right room. And every time he nearly saw something, they kind of distracted him and got him going in a different direction. But they went the complete opposite way and went, no, we're going to have like 12, 13 cops in the house. And I was just, all right, fair enough. It means the scene just fundamentally doesn't work. And the worst thing is it's just unnecessary because, like you said, why would 13 cops, and I keep saying these numbers, I don't know if it's accurate, but why did that many cops go to the house?
To be fair, it did set up the inept nature of the cops in this film. When the two cops came up to the van, which was used in a liquor store robbery, and they just left the van. Now,
God, you guys be careful. We're just going to leave now. Don't worry about it. It's
evidence. Wouldn't you get the crime scene guys to come and dust it for prints to find the thieves? No. We're just going to leave this because it's on your property. We'll see you later.
Unless it really was part of the commentary that they purposefully had the cops come in and we're going to make them so ludicrously inept as part of the narrative. but it just didn't work for me because they didn't lean into it enough to make it clear that, oh, this is what we're trying to represent, kind of thing. Instead, it just felt silly to me because I was just like, well, why wouldn't you check the truck, or why wouldn't one of you go and check? Surely one of you would have seen something in the house that made you at least a little bit suspicious.
Because they left. She had her hands all over the van, going, "Oh, there's a bear cub upstairs with our little Alice." Love, you're touching evidence.
Well, there was so much evidence. Silly. Like I said, to sum up, a brilliant film that you really have to just, like, a lot of it just doesn't make sense, and you just got to roll with the punches. And of course, if you watched it when you were a kid, I'm sure you would have, and it wouldn't be a problem. But watching it as an adult, you do have to just kind of go, okay, this is silly, but it kind of means that the movie works, because otherwise it all kind of comes crashing down itself because of the weight of its own storytelling, I suppose. But because it's got such a winning cast, great direction from Wes Craven, so many brilliant ideas that you're willing it to do well. Oh, I certainly was, to the point where I'm just like, I'm willing to kind of let the fault slide, personally. Yeah. Should we go to favorite scene?
Well, just two more things I want to mention before we do that, really quick. The first one being, I couldn't believe how deep he got in her nose. He got in there knuckle deep.
He did.
Like, he was tickling her brain at that point. And the second one, it's nothing to do with the film. I just went into a bit of a deep dive on Ving Rhames because I saw him, and we mentioned him when we did the trailer in the week. And
did Ving Rhames ever look young? Ever?
Yeah. I said to you, "Where's Ving Rhames been?" You said he's basically been doing the
Mission Impossibles
forever. His actual name is Irving. His nickname and his screen name is Ving, obviously. Do you know who gave him that nickname?
No.
The reason why I wanted to mention it is random as fuck. You would never in a million years guess who gave Ving Rhames his name.
Go for it.
Stanley Tucci.
That is random, yeah. I think if you'd legitimately given me like 1,000 guesses, I don't think I would have got to Stanley Tucci, in fairness.
No, Stanley Tucci.
Just called him Ving one day.
Yeah, I think they were in the same acting class or something.
I just have the idea. It's just like, listen, I can't deal with any of this two-syllable shit. I'm going to call you Ving. I'm not having the E in there. Balls to that. You're just Ving Rhames from now on.
But you still get to call me Stanley Tucci.
Yeah. You have to call them by their names. It's always like Ving Rhames, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like weird with footballers. You always refer to them by their second names. Actors, it has to be both their names. But Ving Rhames. No, he's fucking so good in this film. It's such a shame he's not any longer.
Yeah, but
everyone loves and hates, of course.
We'll move on to favorite scene. So do you want to go first, or do you want me to?
I can go first. I mean, it'd be easy for me to say anything with Leroy laying down the law, especially early in the film, where he's just total badass. But for me, I think it is literally Daddy showing up with a shotgun and a gimp suit, which perfectly sums up the tone of the
wish
film.
I went first.
Well, it was that. I mean, I was watching this film and, I'm along for the ride, and then all of a sudden he rolls in with the gimp suit and the shotgun. I'm like, what in the fuck? So yes, in terms of the visceral reaction that got out, I mean, that is my favorite scene in this film.
I kind of wish it wasn't in the trailer, because you watch the trailer and you literally go, is that a gimp suit? So you knew it's coming at some point, whether or not you forgot.
I forgot about it. And the thing is, though, you think there's going to be a bit more context that is going to make sense. So even though I'd seen the trailer and I knew there was a gimp suit in there, the way it just appears in the film, you're like, well, okay, that's just a thing that's happening now. So it still shocks all the same.
That is my favorite scene, because up until that point, you do have a husband and wife who are very protective of their home. You don't know much about it. They're just idiots, psychotic people. Okay, he's got a massive gun. But then all of a sudden, he just runs around the corner in a gimp suit shooting holes in the wall. It's
like the film it's already, like you say, they're a weird couple at that point, but the film is like simmering at a 4 or a 5, and then it just immediately goes to 11. Just immediately out of the blue goes to 11.
Yeah, absolutely. It's my favorite scene as well. I had that written down. The moment he shows up with a gimp suit and a shotgun. And
you're like, oh, this is the kind of film I'm watching.
Towards the end of the film, then he says a shotgun's not enough. I'll put a bayonet on it.
Of course, everyone loves it. Like, if any gun doesn't need a bayonet, it's a shotgun. But sure, why not? In terms of loves, one non-cynical social commentary. As I said, I feel like this comes from the right place. It doesn't feel like a box ticking exercise from a room of like suits. This just feels like Wes Craven making the film he wanted to make. Number two, Ving Rhames. Sure, he's not in enough, but for as long as he is, he absolutely slays this film. And number three, and we have laboured the point somewhat, but it is just how insane this movie goes. Like, it really just goes for it, this film, with just no care as to whether, there's no thought, oh, will this make sense? Will this make money? Will people like it? It's just Wes Craven going, this is the film I want to make, and he's made it, God bless him. So,
you know what he was doing?
Those are my three loves.
Do you know what this film needs? This film needs a gimp suit. Do you know what else this film needs? This film needs holes in the walls. Do you know what this film needs? This film needs a killer dog. Do you know what this film needs? This film needs people under the stairs. Like, fucking hell, Wes, take a breath. Just breathe.
He's got enough ideas to easily make like a TV show out of this. But you know, you already mentioned earlier that they were going to make a TV show, and I think that was probably the best place for it because there's so much story here. But instead, he's tried to cram it, and they still keep it under 2 hours. In fairness, but you know, this film could have argued. The thing is, I don't think it would have made any difference if this film was 10 minutes longer. It arguably needed to be 2 hours longer, so I don't think it makes much of a difference.
We've mentioned it loads, right? About everything is, but my favorite, Mummy and Daddy together, I think they're fantastic.
They are great.
I think they're absolutely great. We didn't mention her enough. She is absolutely psychotic. Her facial expressions, the way she looks, her pointy nose, everything about her, she's absolutely brilliant. Insane.
Well, the great thing is, Daddy's the one running around the house, dancing, wearing a gimp suit, wielding a shotgun, and yet at no point do you think, you always know she's the real psycho. She's the one running the show. And it's, you know, it's a much more, dare I say, subtle performance. That maybe not subtle is perhaps the wrong word, but she doesn't get that opportunity until the end when she starts wielding the knife. But considering the way Daddy's running about the house, you would think you'd be like, oh, well, he's the guy in charge. He's the true lunatic. But you always know it's Mummy. She's the real. Yeah,
she's the one controlling everything.
This house out for sure. Yeah.
Second Fall. I love Brandon Quinton Adams in this as Fall. I think
he is great. He is great.
Yeah. He's got that right amount of not idiocism. Every week I forget a word.
Naivety.
Thank you. Yeah. Just he's so sweet and innocent at this point. He doesn't know what's going on,
but he's just got enough street smarts. And it is probably something we haven't mentioned enough in this podcast is the fact that, you know, a child actor in a leading role can make or break a movie. If you get the wrong kids, it can absolutely tank an otherwise solid film. And he elevates the film, if nothing else. And he is a very, very likable lead. Like you said, like towards the end, he becomes a bit of what's the term, a Mary Sue. He just knows how to do everything, despite the fact he's like 12, 13 years old. But again, you allow it because he's so fucking charming. So yeah. If he wasn't charming, it wouldn't work. But yeah, he's great in this film.
I'm going to put Ving Rhames in as well because you sold me on it. But my actual third one...
Leroy is the best.
My actual third one was going to be Ruby's voice. I love Ruby's voice.
Really?
Sister. I absolutely adore that. Like the way
that is a left field choice for sure. If you'd given me 100 guesses, I would have never got to Ruby's fucking voice.
When you start off at the beginning, they're doing the tarot cards and you just got her doing the reading and stuff. It's so sultry. It's lovely.
Yeah. We did mention the tarot cards. They actually play a pretty big role in this film.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's a whole nother side. So we've missed the boat there. So in terms of hates, number one for me, the fact that the people under the stairs play such a small role for a movie called People Under the Stairs. Like, they're not very threatening either. They're fine. I know they're cannibals, but they, like I said, you can't escape the fact that they look like Wayne's World. They look like they belong in a comedy sketch rather than a horror film.
Do you know what they look like? Do you remember that film we did, Stay Tuned, where they end up on the Wayne's World set?
100%. 100%. They look like
the zombie
on the Stay Tuned Wayne's World set. Yeah. Like the guys in the background doing the filming and stuff are zombies. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Number two, unsurprisingly, Leroy dies too early. Number three, the fact that this kind of movie is never getting made again. What it reminded me of is another Life Force, which another film we covered on this podcast.
Yes, I remember
another film where you're just like, again, like this, it doesn't all work, even more so on that film. It's another batshit film. And you're like, they're never making another film of that insanity with that kind of budget again. In fairness, this film had a much smaller budget. I think the budget of this film was only $6 million, which, especially by today's standards, is absolutely tiny.
Yeah.
But it was still kind of pitched as a relatively mainstream movie, and I just don't think it's getting made anymore. And by the way, if you haven't listened to our podcast or seen Life Force before, I'm pretty sure Life Force is included on Amazon Prime now. So you deserve it to yourself to at least give it a bash, because, you know, we're sitting here talking about a film which is quite insane. Life Force is on a completely, and no pun intended here, completely different planet.
I mean, to be fair, this should have had sequels. You said the budget was 6 million. The
Mhm.
box office was 31 million. It made his
Yeah, it
money back
actually
and
did
then
okay.
some.
Yeah.
All right. So
Yeah,
my
it's a
hates.
strange one.
My hates. Not enough Leroy, as you said.
Oh, definitely not. Leroy.
He's pretty good in that. I'm pretty much on board with you. For a film called People Under the Stairs, I wasn't a huge fan of the fact that they didn't do much.
No, they really didn't. And even like Roach, who I thought was like, well, he's the main person under the stairs, even though he was the kid in the wall. I get that he's part of that group. He just died so quickly. Like one of the posters, because usually before we do this podcast, we kind of put some posters together so we can put them online, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And I think the Blu-ray one in particular has Roach front and center. So I was like, oh, well, Roach plays a massive part. And when I thought of this film, obviously I thought of I to be honest, I didn't even know Ving Rhames was in it, but I thought of Fall. And I thought the parents, but one of the main characters was Roach as far as I was concerned. But yeah, he comes and goes so quickly.
And finally, whether or not it was planned, the ineptness of the cops. I couldn't get over how stupid they were.
No, and if it was on purpose, it wasn't explained well enough.
Yeah,
it doesn't work, sadly.
Right.
Alternative titles.
Oh yeah, there's a couple.
Kids in the Wall, perhaps. Incest and cannibalism. I don't know.
So where are we? So Argentina, the people behind the walls.
It makes just as much sense.
Brazil, the creature behind the walls.
Yeah, it's fine.
Canada were on board with us. They were like, well, no, you can't call it the people under the stairs. Let's just call it the basement of fear.
Yeah. Or Basement Kids or something like that. Yeah, any of those would work.
Denmark, House of Horrors.
Yeah, it's fine.
Germany, the House of the Forgotten.
That's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
It suggests a more somber movie, perhaps, but it still works.
So Italy, I thought this was going to be some sort of translation for Horror House or something like that. But as you've gone on a lot about social commentary, I'm thinking Italy just jumped on there. The Black House.
But it's not a black house, is it? It's very much a white house.
Mm.
And it's a White House in many respects, considering the clear nod to Nancy and Ronald Reagan. So maybe they're going for it and they've not quite hit the nail on the head.
Japan, there's someone in the walls.
That's pretty good.
Mexico, Prisoners of Destiny.
No. I was literally just about to say that because People Under the Stairs doesn't necessarily always make sense. Pretty much every title has been at least a solid alternative, and then Mexico fucking show up and ruin everything.
Poland, In the Darkness Under the Stairs.
That's a bit too long. Yeah, they're going off the rails now.
Portugal, The Prisoners of the Basement.
No, don't like that.
Sweden, House of Evil.
Yeah, it's fine. God, they were all going so well. It's just
and finally, one that doesn't come up much, Venezuela, The Basement of Terror.
It's fine. Yeah. But yeah, I preferred the first few at least.
Yeah.
Do you have any facts for this movie?
Yeah, we got a couple. As you can imagine, there's probably not a load, but we've got some. Once I find them, hang on. There you go. Wes Craven was inspired to write the film after reading a real-life news story about burglars breaking into a house. When authorities arrived, the burglars had disappeared, but they discovered locked doors with noises coming from behind. Children had been locked up inside the rooms by their parents, never allowed to go outside.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Just lovely.
The coin the fool pulls out of Spencer's hand is real. It is known as an American gold eagle and contains 1 ounce of 22 karat gold. It would have been worth approximately $708 in 1991.
Yeah, so decent money at the end of this film.
Hilary Swank auditioned for the role of Roach.
Oh.
Yeah. Because Roach was originally written to be either a male or female.
Yeah, and Hilary Swank, I mean, I know she was in Boys Don't Cry, but she's got that kind of asexual look almost kind of thing. But I could totally imagine Hilary Swank as Roach.
Yeah.
She's one of those she's both pretty, handsome, and weird looking all at the same time somehow. It's quite odd.
Shortly before his death, Wes Craven was developing a television show version of this film on a Sci-Fi channel. Mm-hmm. Obviously, nothing's come to that yet.
Bit of a shame because I'm not sure if Sci-Fi is the right place for it, considering the kind of budget it would have got, but TV is arguably the right place for it.
Yeah. It was the film debut of Sean Whalen, who played Roach. The only other thing I really know Sean Whalen from, he was in that Tom Hanks film, That Thing
Do What We Do. That Thing You Do, yeah. Sorry, yeah. I think he's had small parts in some relatively big films, which I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think he's one of those guys who's probably been in more movies than we realise.
This is a film debut of quite a lot of people because it's the film debut of AJ Langer and of Wendy Robbie, who played Mother as well. So Robbie.
It's a good cast.
Yeah.
Memorable.
That's it, really. It's just telling you then where the house is located compared to other places that were filmed.
I assume it was actually filmed in LA, was it?
Yeah. So, like, the house is located just a quarter of a mile from the dinner break scene at the beginning of National Security. The house is 0.9 miles from a house in one of the segments of Email 2, Blood Donor, Epitaph, Stitches in Time, Soldier.
Yeah, that is a random list. So, yeah, in LA, basically. In terms of legacy, I mentioned earlier, one of Wes Craven's more interesting movies. As I said, one that certainly didn't get enough credit, I don't think, back in 1991. Horror with social commentary before it became cool. It's much more prevalent nowadays. As I said, just miles ahead of its time in so many respects. It's a kids' movie, not for kids. That's definitely one of its leading legacies, I think. And you already mentioned the whole, remake with a bigger budget, then the whole TV show on Sci-Fi thing. But I think the most interesting one is the potential for a Jordan Peele remake. I mentioned earlier, one of the big success stories in terms of black social horror is Get Out. So I think it's such a great premise. I just worry that it might lose a bit too much of the insanity in the translation, but we'll see if it comes to pass. In terms of making a change, this is the part of the podcast where we pick one thing about the movie we'd love to change and one thing only. And I'm immediately going to cheat because I'm going to say two things. More people under the stairs, please, because it's called People Under the Fucking Stairs. And unsurprisingly, yes, more Leroy. So and if I was forced to pick one, I would have chosen Leroy to maybe survive a little bit longer.
I'm gonna jump in as well with two. So I'm cheating as well this week because I actually had it written down as well. If I was going to change anything, not maybe more people under the stairs, but make them more prominent.
Yeah, that's what.
Oh, that's what I meant. Sorry,
maybe a bit more threatening. They just, I don't know, the whole People Under the Stairs. There was one of the few things in the film that just didn't really land for me.
Yeah, and the other thing. Add some rules to the house. Why is there a slide all of a sudden that the dog goes down? Why are you able to walk through the walls? Just some rules about why the house was like that.
I quite like the fact that the house was an absolute shit.
No, I'm wondering if it's because it was a funeral home. Maybe that's why everything's.
Oh, maybe they tried to at least explain why it was a house of insanity. Basically, why is it built this way? Oh, because blah blah blah. But maybe they were just trying to keep the runtime down.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, it's one of those things where it's not really going to matter, but if I was to change one thing, I would have.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. In terms of video games, I only mentioned it earlier. There wasn't a video game for the movie, but if I was going to choose a developer and a video game, the obvious choice is indeed Resident Evil. You could have the People Under the Stairs as basically the zombies. You could have Daddy as the equivalent of Mr. X, someone you can't kill, you just have to escape, because ostensibly this is a haunted house film, and just like a Resident Evil video game, the house is built by lunatics. It doesn't make any sense, but it's the same as the mansions, as the police stations you get in Resident Evil. If you actually stop and think about the way they're built, they make absolutely fucking zero sense. They're built for a purpose in the video game, in the same way that this house is being built for the movie. It just as long as it keeps the narrative, as long as it gets us in the right place and allows us to do what we want to do, we'll just keep going it. Sense be damned. So yes, I'll go with Resident Evil. And at this point, of course, you'll correct me because you get you win every week when it comes to the video game.
I don't know. I mean, I appreciate that. I'm assuming you said all that. The actual Resident Evil one. It's not the original. It's the
I go for Resident. No, I go for Resident Evil 1. So, because it was in the, it's just a slightly smaller scale, nearly all indoors kind of thing. Or you could do, like you said, Resident Evil 7 would be a good shout because it's in the house, of course. Yeah. Oh shit. Yeah. So even my one, you've corrected. Yeah, Resident Evil 7. Dick.
So I was thinking about that. I would have had if I'm doing a video game, you'd have the People Under the Stairs more prominent. They're the ones you're fighting, things like that. Do you remember in 2010 they did a remake, Splatterhouse?
Yeah. Terrible.
Yeah. It was terrible, but I think the premise is decent.
Yeah, no, it's a solid premise for sure. God, you must be the only person who's bringing that game up. I think most of the world have forgotten about it was released for the 360 and PS3, I think.
Yeah.
It was largely forgotten because it was just so mediocre. But it's one of those ones, like the Splatterhouse name lives on, but not that one. It was the same with they made a Bomberman game for the launch of the original. I think it was it the original Xbox? I think it was, and they made it all like dark and gritty, but a Bomberman game, and it was a complete turd. And it's just been consigned to the history of video games, never to be spoken of again. Now, Splatterhouse isn't quite that bad, but fair play, you know.
Well, no, I mean, if you think about the Splatter, you could have your hero going through, just taking out the people under the stairs and stuff. And the house in Splatterhouse just changed completely as well, depending on what you need. And things. So I would have gone.
That's a deep cut, man. Good shout.
Yeah, but to be fair, I think, even though I said I think I've won this week before we actually started recording, if we're going to do Resident Evil 5, that's probably the winner, because you're in the house. Like,
not Resident Evil 7.
7, sorry. It's 7.
Resident Evil 5 is the one in Africa.
Oh, okay.
You really are leaning into potential social commentary there if you want to do the game in Africa. But no, it's very much the first half of Resident Evil 7, because
I stopped playing them after 3. So
well, 7's fantastic, but specifically the first half when it is in the house, because nearly everything in the house in the first that game is some of the best Resident Evil ever. It loses its way a bit in the second half, but dude, if you haven't got you stopped at 3.
Yeah,
Resident Evil 4 might be the greatest video game of all time.
Oh, sorry. That's the one with Leroy with the Last Plagueis thing, isn't it? Leon.
I would love if Leroy, specifically Ving Rhames' Leroy, was the lead character in Resident Evil 4.
Sorry,
what's up with all these motherfucking plagueis, man?
Leon and Anna with the last. He's got to rescue the president's daughter, hasn't he? Is that
yes. They re-released it recently, didn't they?
I will correct myself. I've played up to 4.
4 is the best. Yeah. But yeah. 5. The thing is, I've liked all of them. Even 6 was too blurry. Anyway, this is becoming the Resident Evil podcast. In terms of scores and recommendations, for me, it's a 4 and a yes. But with the caveat, if I was recommending this to anyone, and it was a luxury that I was myself not afforded, I would go out my way to warn them beforehand that this film is quite bonkers, because I didn't know that going. I didn't know. I
don't think you need to warn them.
I think if I recommended it and they just went in thinking, "Oh, this is just a kids' film," and they watch it, I don't think I could give this a blanket
but you're
recommendation.
Not recommending it as a kids' film. You're not saying watch this with your 4-year-old. They'll love it. Like, you're not doing that.
I know what you mean. I just think I do want to recommend it, because I do think it's a brilliant film in many respects. But I do think it does need that kind of, the explicit lyric warning on like CDs just have. It just needs to be like, beware, this is fucking bonkers warning on the front. That's all it requires.
Beware, gimp suit.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, still 4 stars, and yes, I would recommend.
I said last week I had a feeling I was at least going to do 3 4-star films for HUGtober. I'm on it. It's 4, mate. It is definitely a 4. It's great.
Am I 4 across the board as well? So
yeah, you are so far. Yeah, we're both 4.
Yeah, it's just 4's across the board. In fairness, yeah.
So I really enjoyed it. I absolutely loved watching it again. So I'm not going to show it to my 4-year-old, obviously, but would I recommend it? Absolutely. I mean, but I wouldn't tell people what it's about. I would literally just say, please watch this film. I wouldn't even say it's bonkers. I mean, I am the kind of guy, mind, who's got you to watch Buckaroo Banzai, The Wraith, Nightbreed, all these films.
Yeah, but that's the thing. But I'm a like-minded film fan.
Yeah,
I'm told. When I think about recommendations and I think about this section, I'm always thinking about just like, say, the people I work with who aren't necessarily the biggest movie fans. Would I recommend it to them? And I couldn't just recommend it blankly, because I think it would be like, it was like, I brought it up earlier, Dogtooth, a very different film, but I recommended that to my friend, but without any kind of context, and they were very upset with me. They were very upset with me indeed. Now, this film isn't quite as dark as that, despite the themes. It is more fun, but I think some people, if you recommend it, they might come out and be like, what the hell were you thinking? So, like I said, I would personally have at least a slight caveat, a slight warning. I would highly recommend it, and I would just let people... Just to anyone. Just let them have the right.
And shout it from the rooftops. Just watch people under the stairs.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. All right, so that was the third part of our HUGtober season of Hollywood.
So
Hollywood. I do that every week, Halloween podcast.
HUGtober,
so it's my choice next, yes.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued as it goes, because to be fair, like you said, we've had 3 bangers so far at 4 stars, which I don't think we've ever come across one where we've had 4 in a row. So, I mean, the pressure's on.
I think I'm in pretty safe ground here, unless it's aged horribly. I think, if anything, for me, I haven't seen this for a while, but is it going to be like a 4 or a 5? I don't know, but I don't get ahead of myself because I haven't seen this film for a long time, but it's an absolute cult classic, home to one of the most famous physical effects shots in movie history. John Landis's 1980 comedy horror classic, An American Werewolf in London. So
great.
I love that film growing up. I know it's beloved by many, but it's a film I have not seen in a very long time. And I think it's one of those films, it's more famous for just a shot than the movie itself, if that makes sense.
The transformation scene.
100%.
Yeah,
that's what everybody remembers.
I'm really looking forward to seeing that transformation.
Well, that's the thing. I have every faith in the transformation scene holding up. I'm just interested to see if the whole movie shows up, because this is weird. We mentioned a bunch of time on this podcast about the idea of 80s films not really starting until like 1983. That, if you go back and watch 48 Hours, for instance, one of the examples were used, in many respects, it feels like a 70s film in the same way that Rambo First Blood does. It doesn't feel like a quintessential Rambo film. It feels like a 70s film. And it's not often just the aesthetics of it, but it's the pacing. A lot of those films from the late 70s, early 80s, they feel a lot slower. And that's my only concern going back to watch this. It's like, will it feel slow going back and watching it in 2023? But I'm still looking forward to it all the same. I
don't think we'll have much of an issue. But do you know what's very weird? Is the fact that, you said, if you mention American Werewolf in London, a lot of people go for that shot. And that was the first thing I mentioned. I'm looking forward to that transformation scene. But the thing that sticks in my mind more was the fact that the porn cinema in the middle of London.
Oh, no. I was going to say their coats. Their coats are so iconic. I always just remember their fucking puffer coats.
Their porn cinema in the middle of London. Like, he goes into a porn cinema, if I remember rightly, and just meets all the deceased people he killed in a porn cinema.
See, now you're saying that, I'm like, I can't wait to this film. If that isn't a great advert, go back and rewatch this film before we cover it in the podcast next week. I don't know what is. So yes, John Landis's 1980 cult classic, American Werewolf in London. So do you have anything else to add before we wrap up, dude?
No, actually, I haven't got anything this week, so you're all letting us down a little bit. Drop us a message. Just have a chat with us. I can mention you on the podcast, and I actually have something for this.
Careful. Don't want to sound too needy. Okay, I've been Liam. This has been Rob.
Please message me.
And you've been listening to the Hey You Guys podcast. See you guys next week. Oh, and before I forget, where can folk reach us if they were so inclined to?
Well, you can actually reach us on Hey You Guys 80s at Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter. But if you want to send us a mail, do heyyouguys80s@gmail.com. Send us in your recommendations. Send us in your thoughts about any of the episodes. Just literally talk to us. We'll have a one-sided talk with you on the podcast.
Yeah. We're nice folk. Get in touch. But no, cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye now.